Ladies and gentlemen, today is a very exciting day for all those who are fans of PlayStation, as today Sony has officially announced that the next PlayStation is called PlayStation 5. This comes hot off the press as PlayStation confirms the name and announces a release date for holiday 2020, which is going to be between October and December of next year. We really don't have long to wait, but on top of that, we also have some brand new exclusive information about the controller for PS5, which is going to be a brand new DualShock with some very cool tech inside, and as well as going over some awesome quality of life improvements. Make sure you watch all throughout so you don't miss out on any bits of information. Let me know in the comment section if you're Team Xbox or Team PlayStation. If you're excited about this PlayStation 5 news and want to support the video, then a like would be super appreciated. Here's what we know so far about the PS5. It will boast a CPU based on AMD's Ryzen line and a GPU based on its Navi family, and it will ditch the spinning hard drive for a solid state drive. It will turn loading times from a hassle into a blink of an eye, and it's not just the speed that makes the SSD formidable, but the efficiency that it offers. Looking at games like Marvel's Spider-Man, for example, there are some pieces of data duplicated 400 times on the hard drive, and the SSD will sweep away the need for all of that duplicating, so not only is it raw read speed dramatically faster, but it saves crucial space. The way in which developers will take advantage of that space will likely differ, but some may opt to build larger or more detailed game worlds, others may be content to shrink the size of the games or the size of the patches for games, which has always been a huge big problem with PlayStation 4, as well as the installation for those. But either way, physical games for the PlayStation 5 will use a 100GB optical disc, which is inserted into an optical drive that doubles as a 4K Blu-ray player. It comes to game installation, which is mandatory given the speed difference between the SSD and the disk drive will be a bit different than the PlayStation 4. This time around, they're aiding in part with the simplified game data possible with the SSD and changing the approach for a more configurable installation and removable process. So in theory, you could install literally just the game's multiplayer campaign, leaving the single player campaign for another time, or just installing the whole thing and then deleting the single player campaign once you finished it. Regardless of what parts of a game you choose to install and play, you'll be able to stay on top of it via a completely revamped user interface. The PS4's bare bones home screen at times feels frozen. You can see what they've recently done or what game they might be playing at the moment, but without launching an individual title, there's no way to tell what single player missions they're playing or what multiplayer games they can join, and the PS5 will change that. Even though the PS5 will be quick to boot games, they don't want the player to have to boot a game up just to see what their friends are doing on it, then quit that game, boot up another one. Multiplayer game service will provide the console with the set of joinable activities in real time, so you can see what single player missions players are doing and what rewards you might receive for completing them. Let's move on to what I'm sure most of you are very interested about, which is the next generation controller. The controller doesn't have a name yet, but of course history would suggest one day it'll be called the DualShock 5. It does have some very interesting features PlayStation are very happy to acknowledge, one being adaptive triggers, which can offer varying levels of resistance to make shooting a bow and arrow feel like the real thing, the tension increasing as you pull the arrow back, or make a machine gun feel far different from a shotgun. It also boasts haptic feedback, far more capable than the rumble motor console gamers are used to, with highly programmable voice coil ancutators located in the left and right grips of the controller. And this is combined with an improved speaker on the controller, where the haptics can enable some astonishing effects. And this was used in some very short demos, one being a game for PlayStation VR called Astrobot Rescue Mission, where the character ran through a platform level featuring a number of different surfaces which were all very distinct with their own tactile experiences, where sand felt slow and soggy for the controller, mud felt slow and sloggy, and on ice a high frequency response made the thumbsticks really feel like the character was gliding on ice, and jumping into a pool they got the sense of the resistance of the water with a bouncy sensation. The next was a version of Gran Turismo Sport that Sony had ported to a PS5 dev kit. If over the last few weeks and months you've seen images circulating of rumored dev kits of the PS5, then this image you're seeing now, which Gizmondo reported on, is indeed what a dev kit for the PS5 looks like. Now, I must stress, this is not what the actual home PlayStation 5 will look like when you buy it on day one. This is simply a dev kit, which is like a much more beefed up, generic, boring looking version where it's just beefed up and that's what developers use to create the games on. That's not what the actual home console will look like. Nevertheless, it is incredibly interesting to look at pictures, but when it came to Gran Turismo, driving on the border between the track and the dirt, they could feel both surfaces, and doing the same thing on the same track using a DualShock 4 on PS4, the sensation disappeared entirely. It wasn't that the old style rumble feedback paled in comparison, but it's that there was no feedback at all. And this haptic feedback has apparently been in development since the DualShock 4 was in development, and they could have included it in the PS4 Pro, but they thought that doing so would create a split experience for gamers, so the feature suite was held back for the next generation. There's some small other improvements as well, such as the next gen controller using a USB Type-C connector for charging, and you can play through the cable as well, has a larger capacity battery, and haptic motors make the new controller a bit heavier than the DualShock 4, but it will still come in a bit lighter than the current Xbox controller with batteries in it. How game studios are going to use all these new features, from previously known features like the SSD and ray trace acceleration to newer features like the controller and real-time user interface, is still a matter of some speculation. And while a number of studios already have the PS5 dev kits, the controller prototypes began rolling out much more recently, and no one is ready to name specific titles that they're developing for the PlayStation 5. But there is a big one that's being worked on right now, says Marco Thrush, who's president of Blue Point Games, who recently worked on last year's PS4's remake of Shadow of the Colossus, and just said that they'll let you figure out the rest. But that doesn't mean that they're not exploring these features. The SSD is apparently something which a lot of developers are really excited about. You don't need to do gameplay hacks anymore to artificially slow players down, lock them behind doors or anything like that. Back in the cartridge days, games used to load instantly, and that is something which Sony are exploring, and that's the kind of thing that they want consoles to go back to what they used to be. So no more loading screens and annoying like minute waits for stuff like GTA 5 to load. This is gonna have the philosophy of stuff being able to load instantly. Very interestingly, the chief studio officer at EA had something to say as well about the tech on the PS5, saying that they could be really specific and talk about experimenting with ambient occlusion techniques or the examination of ray traced shadows, but more generally, they're seeing the GPU being able to power machine learning for all sorts of really interesting advancements in the gameplay and other tools. Above all, it's the speed of everything that will define the next crop of consoles. They're stepping into the generation of immediacy, where in mobile games, you expect the game to download in moments and then just be a few taps away from jumping right in. Now they're able to tackle that in a big way, and that sort of tackle gets a lot easier. And as the CEO mentions now, with the burden being lifted off his shoulders, we can all say hello to the PlayStation 5 officially, and maybe one day soon we'll all learn what the thing actually looks like. So far, all we have is the images of the dev kits as the only images to go by, which again, like I mentioned, is not at all what the final design is going to look like when we get our hands on it. This is simply just a really beefed out, funky version of the console where all its components are just laid out in a very bizarre way so that developers have full access to be able to use the consoles to their full ability to develop their games. Like I said earlier, it is really intriguing to go and look at these just to see if, you know, the final design holds anything like this, and if something like this would even fit in the space of modern consoles today. I mean, the PlayStation 4 has a very sleek, small design, and it would be crazy for them to go away from that and have something as big as this. And as you can see, this device faces forwards at an angle. It has like a very sizable V-like divot that dominates the design, and it has vents embedded in the sides of the divot with like gill-like vents to the left and right side. And we have these small buttons on the front as well as some LEDs as well. We can see a rectangular port, and next to it are 5 rectangular holes that represent USB-A ports with a large circle that could be anything from a status light to a power button directly above these ports. The image you have been seeing here has just been a render of the device, which they've taken quite a few liberties for elements that could be the ports, the buttons, the LEDs, or all three. The site that created this, called Let's Go Digital, theorized the device was likely either the PS5 or a developer console, and it seems that it's confirmed from today's news that this is 100% a dev console for the PS5. But like I mentioned, these dev consoles tend to be visually dramatic. They prioritize performance, so they're usually substantial with huge vents and room for airflow, but yet there's still an opportunity for a branding exercise expensive. Companies won't spend the kind of time or money on the look of a dev console as they would spend on the design and look of the final product, but it's still very intriguing to look and see when it comes to theorizing what it could be and what it could look like. But with all that news out the way, I'd love to know down below in the comment section, what do you think of all this news that's come out today? The name is officially PlayStation 5, which it's obvious, but it's very, very exciting that it's 100% confirmed now, particularly when it comes to those controller changes where they're changing the way that the feedback is, not only through the triggers but also through the sticks as well, which react to what you're doing on screen. This could be a very, very cool change, which we could see across the board when it comes to all consoles. You know, Xbox might do the same. They already had haptic feedback in the triggers of the Xbox One controllers, but not with the sticks. So it's very, very cool. But if you're watching this and you're probably a little bit confused why I'm uploading a video about this, like every single one of you watching this video, I am of course hugely invested into video games. I absolutely love when new consoles get announced and hearing details about it. Sometimes it's quite difficult to find out information about it. And during the last generation, I covered a ton of news videos on the Xbox One and the PS4, and they all went down really well. And I covered a video back in April about the PlayStation 5. It went down super well. I love just creating a conversation with you guys in the comment section to discuss your love and passion for consoles, just like I do. But if you want to keep up to date with the latest PlayStation 5 and Xbox Scarlet news, make sure you subscribe to the channel. But thank you for watching. I'll catch you next time.